Hello, folks. My next guest needs no introduction. It is Jon Alexander, who's the author of Citizens, which is how most of you will know him. He's done 2 events, in-person events with us at the London Coworking Assembly. A lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, say, that book, that discussion gave me the language I was looking for about how to run my co-working space. And in this podcast, we get into how important it is for your co-working space to be part of the local community and civic infrastructure and connecting people and all the useful things. Now, for a long time, a lot of us in the industry have been saying a co-working space is a convening point for everyone in your local neighborhood or your local community, and it fulfills the role that a lot of places of worship and pubs and community centres, where in the context of this, it's London, a lot of those places, youth clubs don't exist anymore. So there's a role that is available for co-working spaces to fill in the neighbourhood beyond just renting desks and meeting rooms. There are so many places that are doing that, and a lot of you I know listening to this, and this is kind of like a little thought process and blueprint, and then there's links in the show notes to see how to do that further. And if you ever want to know anything about how to do the stuff we talk about in this podcast, subscribe to the London Coworking Assembly email, subscribe to link in the show notes, which is a LinkedIn newsletter we do every week, and just get in touch. Okay, let's get into today's show. Hello, folks. It is yet another, what do we call it? Co-working values podcast. I'm so excited today. Obviously, I'm excited at every guest because I know a lot of past guests listen, but today is Mr. Jon Alexander. What are you known for, Jon? What would you like to be known for, Jon?
Wrote a book called Citizens.
Yep. What would you like to be known for now? Because you're the Citizens guy. Have you moved on now?
No, I can take that. I'll stick with that. But I'm going to try and nudge it into figuring out what to do with politics before it all falls apart.
That sounds like a great title for a book. So we were like riffing before we came on here, and we've only got like 19 minutes or something. So what do you want people to know in co-working at the moment? Because we have a little list here. Let's not pretend we weren't writing things down, but it's a very specific time in the political architecture of the UK and London.
Yeah, I mean, I think it basically that it really matters to do what you're doing and actually to see yourselves as political actors, right? Like what we're staring down the barrel of is frankly the collapse of the Labour government, the collapse of the Conservative Party. The central scenario right now is that Reform win the next general election, and we have essentially a far right national government in this country. And to the temptation, I think, is to tune out of that and think, we're not completely directly relevant to that. Well, we are, right? Like these spaces are where increasingly they're critical civic infrastructure. They're what I think of as civic catalysts, and they are where people meet one another, where people, with a bit of engagement and a bit of facilitation, where people can be encouraged to face into the challenges facing their local communities and their national communities and actually start to do stuff together in the face of those. And that, I think, is what politics is, actually. And where that stuff is happening is where places are most resilient to the threat of the far right. And the way I understand it is that what we're living in right now is the collapse of the consumer story, of a whole idea of people as consumers who are fundamentally motivated by self-interest and a form of democracy that I would call consumer democracy, where people's only agency is to choose between a fixed set of options and where they're encouraged to make that choice on the basis of individual self-interest. And as that falls apart, we're seeing the return of what I call the subject story, the strongman leader, the authoritarian. And the only antidote to that is to step into a different logic, what I call the citizen story, the logic that says that actually all of us are smarter than any of us, that the way to face the challenge of our times is to tap into the ideas and energy and resources of everyone, and to reimagine our institutions to tap into that collective intelligence and wisdom and resource. And co-working spaces are spaces for that to happen. So if co-working spaces step up and acknowledge that, and I'm not saying like declare yourselves a political affiliation in a capital P politics sense. I'm saying understand how important you are as as resources and spaces and catalysts in your community, and lean into that. Start hosting events that are about celebrating the best of what your local area is about and is capable of, and naming the challenges facing your local area, and convene people to come up with shared initiatives across your kind of the people working in your spaces to face into those challenges, working from the best of what is. Face that role, step into that space, and you have a really important role to play.
There's like when you came to both those sessions in the London Co-working Assembly, people always said that's what I've been looking for. And there's in the activism thing with Gavin and Heather and Tamsin, there's a lot of I read that book. That's what I've been thinking for ages. And it's not so much like you came up with Harry Potter. It's just like collecting those ideas together. It's like that's what I mean. Like I think you articulated it really well. And what we're looking for is, and what has come out of those two London co-working assembly sessions is people go, that's the language I need. And how do people? There are people putting it into action already, but how do people put it into action? Because I find myself saying to people like, yeah, get people together in your local area. And everyone agrees, but there seems to be this kind of, I don't know what to do. Like, do I run a sewing club? I mean, obviously people do things. It's not like the whole co-working industry is incapacitated, but what have you seen that really works in a co-working environment? That was a very long question, John. Sorry.
Sorry, mate. I think. Well, firstly, I think the actionism space and the online presence and the film that they've made is a really powerful tool. Like if you're really at fault to try and think of anything to do, then do a screening of actionism and then hold a conversation off the back of it about what might we want to start here. That's not a bad option.
Can you just say a quick, for people like me that are lazy and listen to podcasts and don't know and click the show notes, what can you do like a too long didn't read for the actionism movie?
Yeah, well, it's basically the story of a young woman's journey from anxiety to action. So Early Meredith, young woman who was coming out of school kind of a bit paralyzed by climate anxiety, frankly. And she read my book Citizens, got in touch with me, and I met up with her, and she told me what she was passionate about, and it was the outdoors. And I happened to have been invited to speak in a kind of basically a co-working space by any other name in a little village in the French Alps. And so I introduced her to the people behind that, and she went to meet with them, and they got involved, and that little space in the French Alps has since become a movement of independent outdoor retailers shifting their business models from sale and retail to reuse, repair, and upcycle, and becoming kind of community spaces and built around reuse, repair, and upcycle. And Ellie found her agency in that kind of community. And the story of her doing so, but also the broader story of like just start is in that film, in a sort of 25-minute film. And it's a great seed. Like it's not necessarily saying everyone should become reuse, repair, upcycle fanatics, right? But it's saying start with what you love and what you care about. Find the others and then figure out what you want to do together. And those for me are the real steps. And that becomes, so that's what the film is. It's an example of that, and therefore really great conversation fodder. But if you don't want to do a film screening, the steps still apply. I think the conversations I would be trying to host if I were running a co-working space start with events that try and celebrate the best of what is in that local place. I'm a big fan of starting with celebration rather than starting with problems, because I think that builds the energy, and I've seen it happen. And it's actually a pattern that's replicated across many of the initiatives that whose stories I tell across the world, from political movements in Australia to co-working spaces in Norway. So start with what do we love about this place? What shared love brings us together? and then once you've got the community coming together around that kind of thing, and you can do that with awards, and you can do it with parties and all sorts, then move into the conversation of what might we want to do to make it even better. How do we want to face into the challenges of our time? And off the back of that, like, what's the first thing we can do? Because that process of celebration into convening and into prototyping essentially actually unleashes the energy really quickly. It feels like you're starting one step further back, because you're starting by convening around love of place rather than convening around action. But actually, that sort of sharing that love is really important. The underlying spirit, I really love the phrase that Cormac Russell, who wrote a wonderful book called Rekindling Democracy. Cormac has this lovely phrase. It says, "Start with what's strong, not with what's wrong, and then use what's strong to fix what's wrong." And I think that's
so
the spirit of it.
Yeah. Start with what's strong, not with what's wrong.
And then use what's strong to fix what's wrong.
All that, just to reaffirm what you just said there, is, so many times, especially in a co-working space context, we've been like, we need to get people in, we've got to hire the Foo Fighters and Cirque du Soleil, and you have to have this, like, it is like the consumer hook. You have to have a hook to get people in. And the reverse of it, like, the best example is the Right Club. We ran for a long time in co-working spaces, and me and my mate Phil we started to run this little Right Club thing we started in Hackney, and then it really took off in Euston. And so, like, 4 people would come, then 6 people would come, and after a few weeks, 20 people would come. There were people sitting on the floor writing, and then they'd come to talk about writing because they didn't have anywhere else to go to talk about writing. And there were journalists talking to academics, talking to poets. A guy came along who just got a keyboard out, and we're like, "What are you doing? You can't play that here." And it's like, "Oh no, it's a writing club. I'm going to write music." I'm like, "Yeah," it was such a cool little moment. It was one of those sort of little keyboards that you play like a guitar in an 80s pop band.
Nice.
But yeah, you don't have to have a big hook to get people there, and you have to start the conversation somewhere. Is that what you were saying? Just to double check before I confuse the audience.
That's part of it, but I think also the thing about appreciation, like, start with love, right? Don't start with the problem. Start with either a shared love of an activity like the Right Club, or start with shared love of the place, like that. This frame of kind of, if you love, where were we for one of them? Peckham. If you love Peckham, you're already a member of this space, like, and then gather people just for a night and have conversations about what's the best thing about Peckham, and cover the walls with that stuff. And you'll find pretty quickly that the conversation moves into, what can we do to make it better. But by coming from shared love, you create a different environment for that conversation. You create a muscle. There's all sorts of stuff you can introduce into that. I mean, I love the work Phoebe Tickell's doing on moral imaginations, and giving people tools that she calls imagination activism. And there are a few co-working spaces in other parts of Europe that I know that are building themselves around Phoebe's work by creating little chapters locally of people who dare to imagine a different future for their local area. But that's and the Actionism film's another one. There are so, like, once you start to go, and it can just be like, how do we celebrate what our place is? And the reason this is so powerful, I think, is because we're currently told there's a sort of there's a cultivated helplessness in society at the moment, I think. I've been working with this concept from relationship theory called the drama triangle as a way of understanding how screwed up our politics is. And the drama triangle, if you imagine an equilateral triangle with the flat side at the top, the 3 poles of the triangle are marked perpetrator, rescuer, and victim. And the argument basically is that when any kind of relationship goes wrong, so I'll bring this back to politics and co-working spaces in a minute, but go with me for a sec. When any kind of relationship goes wrong, one or some people tend to move into a kind of perpetrator role. So they step into excessive agency. They start to see themselves as the ones who will do everything. Anything that is to be done will be done by them. One or some people step into victim role. So they do the opposite. They step out of agency and they come to actually be kind of comfortable and complicit in being in a space where where everything happens to them without them having any say. And one or some people enter the rescuer role, so they intervene with the perpetrator on behalf of the victim, but still don't give the victim any agency. And the argument in relationship theory and relationship counselling is that when this kind of pattern establishes, it's very hard to break because there's a kind of blame cycle. But the trick is to say everyone is guilty and no one's to blame. And then there's work to be done at each of the three poles, which actually then flips the triangle on its head. So the point comes to the top. And what you then have is victims become creators. That's the key work. Victims step into their agency and claim their ability to start shaping their own context. That pushes and perpetrators need to become challengers and question holders instead of answer providers, and to work alongside. And rescuers need to become supporters, kind of cheerleaders rather than interveners on behalf of. And the reason why I think this is relevant to our politics, I think what we've got today is a situation where we have politicians and the state and councils as kind of perpetrators. There was an interview I did with someone with a chief executive council who's like, I don't know how to break this, but we've got to this situation where if something is to be done, it's seen as the council's role to do it. And you're like, and we need to break out of that. And the way to break that is for citizens to become creators rather than victims. And the role of co-working spaces in that is I think crucial. Spaces that provide people with the opportunity to move from victims who have stuff done to them to active creators of a different future. And only when we do that I think we will actually kind of create a different space for our politics to move into. So, and if we don't do that, then I think we're in real trouble. And we are in real trouble, right? But I guess what I want most when I come and do anything with you, Benny, and with the co-working assembly is I want people to understand that their work matters, really matters.
It is. I think the message has got way more traction because a lot of people were thinking about it, and what's happened a lot over the years is the amount of people that have said some form of I want to be like WeWork, which is a bit like going I want to be like the Hilton or I want to be like TGI Friday. They're kind of, and it's like me going, I want to be like Dave Grohl, because I've seen something and I think that's how you do that really well. So I want to go and do that. And then all of those people, and I said this to them, like there was one space in Camden, and there was like five I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, you have this, and this. One of the things they had was one of the, at that moment in time, they had one of three gigantic 3D printers in London. There was only like three of these things available for anybody in London. I said, you got that 3D printer and you have all this other stuff going on and you're in Camden, home of madness. Like, why do you want to go and imitate them? And there's something about like being very confident in yourself as your business and not trying to imitate other people. And I think that, I'm thinking out loud here. Sorry, I've lost it. But
no, mate. I mean, there's a little tool, a little framework that I work with a lot. I call it the 3 principles of participatory organisations, and came up with this originally as a hack on the old 4 Ps of the marketing mix. I don't know any. I mean, the product, price, promotion, and placement is this framework that's called the marketing mix that has been taught on every MBA course in every country in the world since like 1950. Huh?
Is it Cutler's 4 Ps?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I basically think that framework is evil because the 4Ps traps you in thinking of people as consumers, and it's so deep in our culture really, is to think it becomes a kind of gravitational pull. And co-working spaces I encounter think like that as well. They're like, what do we offer people? How do we position ourselves in the market? All of this stuff. And actually, I think those are the wrong questions. Like, for me, the questions that co-working spaces should be asking are so the three principles of participatory organizations I work with: purpose, platform, and prototype. And each of them has a question with it. The purpose question is, what are we really trying to do here? And what are we trying to do that's so big that we need people to help us do it rather than us doing it for them? So that's the first question I think a co-working space should be asking. It's like, and I bet you for most of them, the answer is something to do with that, with the place. Like, really, you're trying to be a space that helps make Camden better, or helps unleash the potential of a demographic, or whatever like that. But it's something meaningful that you're trying to do in the world. It's not a product that you're offering that is your reason for getting up in the morning. So name that thing and frame it as a question. Frame it as like, how can we help young black men to find their futures? How can we how can we work together with the citizens of Camden to make Camden a really flourishing, like, inclusive place, not just a gentrified mania? And then the second principle, platform, is what are the structures and opportunities you create to make it meaningful and joyful for people to participate in that? How do you, like, create events that make them want to come along and share their ideas? How do you create challenges that give them opportunities to express that love? How do you create incentives for them to produce, like, expressions of love of place? How do you create context where they can come up with new initiatives? You're not trying to do it for them. Like, you're not the actor on the stage, you're the stage and they're the actors. And there are many ways of doing that. We've got this in chapter 6 in my book. There's like 7 prompts. I call them the 7 modes of everyday participation. And then the third principle, prototype. So purpose, platform, prototype. What are you really trying to do in the world? How do you create the structures that make it meaningful and joyful for people to do it with you? And then how do you build the energy for it? Because you can't necessarily kind of do all of this overnight. And I think this speaks back to your example of the Right Club, right? Like, how do you spot where someone has some energy for something and feed it and build it from where they are? And that,
Yep.
I think if people can think with those 3 principles, purpose, platform, prototype, instead of, and kind of consciously acknowledge and then dismiss the old 4 Ps of marketing, then I think you've got a chance of building communities and movements rather than selling desks. And I think that's when you start to be a meaningful political contributor with a small p.
I want to jump on that, spotting when someone has the energy for something, because a lot of co-working spaces that are very, have a very strong community. I'm thinking of like Creative Works in E17 and Space 4, and it goes on and on. But they have people who are members of the co-working space organize events in there. So there's not this kind of like Butlins cruise ship cheerleader organization. It's like, I'll go, I really want to do an event about Sicilian cupcakes made with organic milk, and then suddenly, you find the people, and because you're organizing it in your co-working space, me as the instigator of that event, I'll get people to come to it rather than like sending endless. I mean, I love email, folks, but sending endless emails. Where is there anything I haven't asked you, Jon, that you're like dying to tell me, or the other?
I don't think so. I mean, I think just to say, like, I ultimately, I think we're living in a scary but very exciting moment in time. Like, the WeWork way of doing things, frankly, I think is dead and broken. And the opportunity that creates for a much more kind of distributed power world where actually these spaces are where the future can be built. Like, I think is huge. And so it's not another thing I'm saying, it's the same thing I'm saying, but it's just to say, like, this work really matters. and don't think that climate emergency and AI and all this stuff mean this work is too small or whatever. Like maybe I'll leave it with the I really love the Adrienne Maree Brown thing. Adrienne Maree Brown is a kind of queer black thinker. She wrote a book called Emergent Strategy, and she has this lovely phrase. She says, we've actually had enough of mile wide, inch deep change because it just bounces off. What we need in this moment is inch wide, mile deep change that schisms the existing paradigm. And she's just saying, like, commit to place, commit to demographic, commit to the thing that makes you, and go deep on it, because that's actually the contribution we need in this moment.
I really agree with that. When going very deep, and growing roots, to extend the metaphor, is that's just worked for me. I was going to get all flowery there, but like, really commit. Like, this podcast is a great example. We do this twice a week, and we seek out stories like this. So coming up, there's already stories of people that are doing. As you were talking today, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to interview that person about that place and that person about that place, and like Imi from Civic Square and stuff like that, to sort of continue this little roadmap we've made here. Where is the best place to find you online, Mr. Jon Alexander? I
have a website, jonalexander.net. There's an email sign up right at the bottom of the page that I need to get further up the page. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm kind of on Instagram. I'm out there. I'm about to back off a bit because I'm trying to write another book, but I'm out there.
Yeah, I would say like LinkedIn's the best place to keep up with you in a sort of social, fast-moving context thing. Because we'll put a link in the show notes to all of that, folks. We'll also put a link in the show notes to Unreasonable Connection, which is an hour-long session we do once a month for co-working community builders. So if you run a co-working space or you own a co-working space, you can. The way it happens is we open the room, we all say hello, and then we put you into rooms of like 3 or 4 people, and you talk, and then you come back and tell us what you talked about. And if you don't want to tell us what you talked about, that's fine too. But it's exactly what Jon said: is getting people together to celebrate the highs and lows of running a co-working space. And there is the LinkedIn co-working group, which is like the most active it has ever been. Caleb, Suzanne, Fanny, Mark, and I all post our podcasts in there, and then people comment on that. So you would have been listening to this going, I really agree with Jon, or I hate Jon, or whatever you were thinking. So go and put it in that LinkedIn group. It's a closed environment, so you're not going to get like taken down off the internet. It's people from all over the world talking about how to build co-working spaces, run co-working spaces, and connect. And wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle. Say goodbye, Jon.
Bye.